everyone. Hi there, it's Tammy. Thank you very much for joining me. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I'm really excited to be doing this these days. I've been doing these videos now for about 3.5 years. If you happen to see other videos, my earlier videos, and you're concerned that maybe things have kind of changed because there has been an evolution to my work, please let me know. Don't be discouraged. I'm always happy to clarify and clean some things up because there's been some changes throughout, like I said, throughout my career. And if you have been with me on this journey, I really appreciate you sticking with me as we go through this life together. But as it is, I started working on a blog post yesterday, and I spent the morning kind of editing it and cleaning it up and adding to it. And because it's getting ready to get dark already, I just decided to go ahead and shoot a video now because I'm really stoked about this. It's like something that I brought up in the post made me stop and think, it would be a kind of cool thing to do it in a video too. And that's the reason why I titled it, everything in moderation. Because the fact is that one of the things that I suggested in this post is, number one, we're all living with addiction. Now, before you turn it off and get offended, please understand addiction has a really bad rap in our culture. Addiction, by definition, is a change in the dopaminergic mesolimbic pathway. That means there's a change in the structure in the brain. And of course, they've identified a number of substances, drugs and alcohol, caffeine, nicotine. These chemicals all have the ability to alter this brain structure. But the thing is, so does cortisol. Okay, so like I said, essentially we're all living with addiction. Now, what I want to also say is people, although they walk around talking about being an addict or having gone through addiction recovery, so on and so forth, that by all definition, again, the DSM-5 does not diagnose addiction. The DSM-5 is the manual that psychologists and psychiatrists are using to determine a mental health condition. And so therefore, it's actually called a substance abuse disorder because, quite frankly, most people, and I've worked in treatment facilities, are not admitted and go in for a brain scan to determine whether or not they actually have an addiction. It's based on what they report and their behaviors. And no disrespect intended when I say this, but I've been into therapist's office with some of my kids. And my youngest daughter, when she went in, the therapist based her diagnosis, and unfortunately, my daughter's diagnosis changed over the years. I mean, it just vacillated from bipolar disorder to mild schizophrenia. I mean, there was I can't even remember all the different. I mean, she was being tossed around. It just reminded me of a boat on the water, and the water, and lots of wind and lots of waves, and she just kept getting tossed around, and she kept getting different diagnoses depending on who was talking with her. But I'll never forget the first time I went in with her, and I sat with the therapist, and all she did was observe Ashley, and then she looked at me and she asked me some questions, and then she turned around and she gave a diagnosis. And I understand that these mental health issues present with different types of behaviors and personality quirks and so forth. It just seemed incomplete. And I know that you really can't do a blood test, but I actually walked out of there and looked at her and go, "You're going to base her diagnosis off of what I report?" I mean, she was 7, 8 years old, and she sat on the floor and played with toys. And she asked Ashley a couple of questions, and then she talked with me, and that was the diagnosis that she gave her. So this is, in a sense, and I can't speak for all of the therapists out there who are administering diagnoses, and I do understand that it's a tough job. So like I said, I don't mean any disrespect. It just seems a little bit too generalized and potentially dangerous. And in this case, like I said, with addiction, it's randomly handed out. And like I said, most people don't walk out and go, "Hey, I was just handed a substance use disorder diagnosis." They come out and say, "I'm an addict." And the thing is with this culture, like I said, addiction is not, it's frowned upon. It's not looked upon favorably, that yet in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing in the way of research and understanding how the chemicals actually work in the brain, every one of us is walking around with addiction, and how that manifests in the individual is unique to them. It's it's partly how they're wired. It's partly their decisions, their choices and habits. Some people go for habits that tend to be considered more healthy than others. I'm not here to tell you whether something's good or bad. It's just essentially that the more habitual our behaviors, the more we're actually feeding. Mm, sorry. The more we're actually feeding this inflammatory process. And if I would really encourage you to go read this, but essentially what I'm talking about is that there's dopamine receptors. How do I want to say this? The G-coupled protein receptors are known for their transactivation. So there's crosstalk happening in our system. And depending on what's coming in from the outside, it's sending signals to our brain, which is then producing new chemicals. And again, if it's a survival mechanism that's required, we experience inflammation. And the chemicals that are produced from that, although they have a purpose, because not all stress is bad stress, some stress is actually essential stress, but the body can't differentiate between harmful or essential. So the same chemistry is produced, and on a chronic basis, this is where degenerative disease and mental health issues and so forth arise. So in this post, I suggested, again, moderation. Don't form habits. Do the best you can to make changes. This is what neurobics is. When you actually do things differently. I understand routine, and a child with autism prefers routine. Many people like routines. It's a safety. It makes us feel safe because it's something we can count on. And yet that routine actually lends itself to mindlessness, lack of awareness, not malicious, but it's just like we get in this comfort zone and we just become almost automated in our activity. That's why taking a different route when you drive is a good idea. So change is the essence of our existence, and it is essential to our existence. And the more that we can change, the more that we can actually keep that inflammation at a lower rate. Not being so rigid, so to speak, in the way we do things. So reducing our need for habitual behaviors. And this is actually a really big deal when I think of autism, because not just the routine, but the repetitive movements and verbal sounds, the stimming and the scripting. This is something that both parents and teachers have reported as one of their concerns, is this repetitive behaviors. And that said, it is a self-soothing. It is actually helping to stimulate the production of dopamine. However, unless the stress mechanism is reduced or deactivated, it would be nice to be deactivated, but the world that we live in doesn't provide the space for that. So helping to reduce the stress mechanism at the cell level is necessary. Otherwise, these children, although stimming and scripting is a natural part of their existence and not to be frowned upon, or, we don't want to eliminate it. That's actually how they self-soothe. And at the same time, it is actually perpetuating the stress activity that's going on at the cell level, because first and foremost, environmental estrogens, sometimes referred to as xenoestrogens, but 45 million chemicals on the planet known to be endocrine disruptors coming into our system, acting like estrogen in the body. Estrogen is a primary signaling molecule which influences the release of dopamine and begins to signal the stress activity. And so if our bodies are being influenced by environmental estrogens, and that's man-made or natural, okay, so we have our own that we're making, and then we have what comes in from the environment. And like I said, it's man-made or natural, so this is what a phytoestrogen is. This is the reason why I say reduce the amount of phytoestrogens that you're consuming. We talk about this in my course. Because ultimately what's happening is these excessive levels of estrogens are coming in, the stress mechanism is being activated, dopamine is being produced, and if we keep doing this without reducing the cellular stress, then we continue to maintain inflammation and we continue to see the upset. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm going to kind of pause that there because that's actually what, I think that's a really good, I think it's a good place to stop because I'm hoping that makes a lot of sense. What we're trying to do basically is reduce the habitual behavior and create change. And oftentimes what I've discovered with autism, when we actually help reduce that cellular stress that I'm talking about, it actually helps to soothe the system. And then they just naturally begin to do things a little bit differently. They don't do things so intensely. There is a lessening of it. So it's not like we have to force it. But that brings me to the next point, which is like I was talking about the phytoestrogens and then the dopamine in the case of stimming and scripting, because that is a movement and behavior. We don't want to duplicate those chemicals either with oils and herbs. So everything again in moderation. Using too many things that are very similar to estrogen, or using too many things that actually have that directly influence dopamine. Again, there are oils that can do that, and there are oils that can act like estrogen. Lavender being one of them. So we have to be careful about what we're introducing into the system because the environment is already influencing our body in great ways. And so if we're going to introduce chemicals into our system, I'm trying to stay out of the light here. If we're going to introduce chemicals into our system as well, being aware that we are heavily inundated with environmental estrogens is key. And how that is going to unfold in the individual system depends again on the individual. So that means understanding your body to a degree that you can not duplicate the mechanism of action, whether it be of a chemical or, or even if it's just using herbs and oils and all for the same reason. You don't want to do that. So there's that. So, and then again, like I said, understanding your body and recognizing how these oils actually work in your system to round things out so that we can begin to reduce the stress mechanism. Look, like I said, stress there's a reason for it. Okay, there's a purpose. Without question, there's a purpose. Our definition of what's good and bad is our definition. Yes, there are some things that are threats to us, to our systems, and therefore the body becomes under pressure and will produce different chemicals as a result. And then there's times where change is necessary, whether it be, physiological changes like growth spurts or the development of a baby or making teeth. I mean, all of this is stress in the system, but it's essential stress. Okay, so it's hard. It's impossible for the body to differentiate between the two because stress is stress. Yet, because of the world that we live in, because of our environment, the level of stress that we are under is chronic. This is the reason for degenerative disease. And so if what we want to do is help our bodies manage this environment, it's to our benefit to actually find a different way rather than duplicating everything all over again and adding more stress to the system when it's not necessary. I hope that makes sense. So, like I said, I have this course coming out, Aromatherapy as a Lifestyle. It's due out February 15th of 2019. I kind of pushed it back a couple of weeks because I had a little bit of setback there. I'm actually adding materials, what it is. So it's due out February 15th. If you sign up right now, you can get the class for half off. You can do that through my website. And I had somebody ask me if there's going to be a private Facebook group for this course. Yes, there is. So once you sign up and pay for your course, which, like I said, you get it for half off now, you will be added to the Facebook group and we can begin discussions there. So, because I'm here for you. And this is an entirely different way of looking at it. I am not talking about essential oils healing the body. I am talking about understanding the quality of our oils and how to implement the use of oils that's safe and effective and does not interfere with the medications that we have available to us. This is not to take the place of any healthcare professionals' advice. This is an adjunctive or an addendum to their advice. And for anybody that wants to know whether or not I understand what I'm talking about, I have 30 years. I'm internationally certified as a master clinical aromatherapist. I do have a background in pharmacology. And I have devoted the majority of my adult life to understanding the stress mechanism throughout nature and how it communicates, and which is all via chemicals. And these oils are chemicals. And I'm not going to tolerate any longer anybody telling me that essential oils are bogus. They are studying oils on a regular basis. They study constituents. I had somebody tell me earlier this morning, well, you base your work, because when I work with private clients, you base your work off of other people's research. That's not entirely true. I pay attention to and I study the individual constituents. I pay attention to what constituents are known for their effect on various genetic receptors. But keep in mind, essential oils, there's these constituents are not isolated to one oil. Okay, there's a lot of plants have have the same constituents. Now they're not all identical, obviously, otherwise they'd all be the same oil. So there's variations within an oil, but you can find, if they're studying something like limonene or linalool, if they're studying these things, they can be found in a lot of other plants. So to say that I base my decisions off of other people's research, again, isn't entirely true. The way I work with private clients is I understand these constituents, I understand their impact on the genetic receptor. I also take into account what's going on with the individual. And then I factor in the full properties of these oils, because something that contains linalool may be estrogen producing, or maybe like estrogen like in the body. Short-term effect is going to be soothing. Long-term effect is going to be aggravating and causing stress. We have to take these things into account. So that's how I work with private clients, and that's actually how I teach you in these courses. It's learning how to discern what oils do what, so that we can better choose what's right for us. And again, if you don't take anything beyond this course, you will be set up for the rest of your life, because you'll have a solid foundation on how to begin to select oils. Beyond this, I'm going to continue to release courses, probably more than likely with specific health conditions in mind. So if there's something that you would like to know more about, let me know. And in the meantime, I am going to say you are at least going to need this course in order to take the other ones. So I appreciate you guys very much. I hope this has been helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. I apologize for the sunlight, although it's glorious given the fact that we've had so much snow lately. So anyway, blessings to everybody. I appreciate you, and I look forward to chatting with you somewhere. Instagram, Twitter at TammyDavis8. It'll be on the private Facebook group should you decide to join me with the class. All right. Thanks, you guys. Be well.